Hey guys, we're back with another episode of Fully Spooled. Today I'm going to be putting the clutch and the flywheel and everything into the transmission to go into the engine to go into the Lexus. That's not confusing. But before that, I wanted to get to one quick thing. I've been chronicling this build on the Something Awful forum and the Automotive Insanity subforum, and Something Awful Goon Safety Dance made a very good point, which says, I just watched your latest video. In the angle spacers you made, how are you going to be able to tighten the engine mount nuts without the captive bolt spinning? Well, originally the plan was once they're in their upright position, the head of the bolt locks against the cylinder wall here. So when I try turning it, it doesn't turn at all. It just locks with it. However, there could be a scenario where it could get corroded or any number of things could happen, and getting the nut to come off without spinning the entire shaft might become a problem. So what I'm going to do to fix this is to put some tack welds around the outside of this bolt to make it, lock in place. So thank you, Safety Dance, for that. And we'll get to that first, and then we'll get into the clutch and transmission. That should be enough to hold the bolt in place, and this guy pretty much fits still totally flush. I might have to just grind it down a tiny bit, but that's okay. Alright, here we have our clutch and flywheel kit. This is a Diamond Stage 2 clutch, which is rated for 600 wheel horsepower. So here we have the hydraulic slave cylinder, and then here is the clutch alignment tool with the pilot bearing on the end of it. This looks like a shim for the hydraulic slave cylinder. And here we have our pressure plate, which is huge. Really pretty though. Here we have our clutch disc. I went for the full face disc for streetability and less chatter. And here we have our flywheel, which is a lightened version. I'm pumped to get this thing installed. So I'm tightening all of my flywheel bolts down to, I believe it's 74 foot-pounds. Yep. I'm doing this in passes though, so it'll be 15 foot-pounds first, and then 37 foot-pounds, and then 74 foot-pounds, and then we'll be torqued down. And it's also important to know that you do this in a star pattern, just like putting your lug nuts on. Well, for some reason I thought that this flywheel came with the bolts for the pressure plate, but I guess not. And here's Connor checking everything out. What do you think? What do you think of this? What do you think of the flywheel, dude? Yeah? Pretty exciting stuff, huh? Pretty exciting stuff. Want the cardboard? Take it. Anyway, I just ordered brand new ARP pressure plate bolts, and also I ordered the flywheel bolts, so I'll end up taking these factory ones off tomorrow and putting on brand new ones that are ARP strength. While I'm waiting for the bolts to show up for the pressure plate, which is a one-day shipping deal, thankfully, I figured I would start attacking the transmission tunnel for clearance issues. When I had the engine and transmission perfectly lined up and in place, it was touching the top of the tunnel. Some people have just cut the tunnel out. Some people have cut holes in the tunnel, and I don't want to deal with that kind of stuff, so I'm going to take my dead blow hammer here and just kind of go to town on this thing. step it up a notch. All right, we're back, and it's a day later, as far as you know. Let's crack into them here. Pressure plate bolts. And our flywheel bolt kit. Alright, what the hell you open these things? Jeez, get the... Oh, are you kidding me? Before going any further, I want to make sure that my starter actually bolts up and hits the flywheel correctly. So I'm just going to put this guy in place. Just like this. That looks about right. Cool. So according to ARP's website, the lubricant goes on the head of the bolt, underneath the head. Just like that. And it'll smear itself around as you install the bolt. And then Loctite goes on the thread itself. Just like that. All right, and with all of the Loctite and the lubricant in place, ARP's website says to go to 84 foot-pounds, so that's what I will do. All right, next we have our clutch alignment tool with our pilot bearing installed on the end of it. I'm going to take all this junk off here. Next up, we have to install the pilot bearing. Now if you look, this is covered in frost because I had it in the freezer to help it shrink down as tiny little bit as it can, but every little bit helps when getting these things in. And as you can see, there are two sides to the bearing. You have this side, which is actually the side that faces the engine, and this side, which faces out towards the transmission, and you can always tell that by this little chamfered edge inside here. It helps the input shaft glide inside the pilot bearing. So we're going to tap that in very gently. And there we have the pilot bearing in, ready to go. All right, next up is the clutch disc itself. It's very easy to figure out which way this goes on, because if you try putting it on like this, the clutch disc does not contact the actual flywheel surface. So it obviously goes on like this, where this will be contacting the actual flywheel itself. And to line this up, we use our clutch alignment tool, which goes on just like this, and then into the pilot bearing hole. And that lines that right up. So pop that guy on. For these bolts, the ARP website says to use just the this stuff, their fastener assembly lube with no Loctite on the threads. So we'll just go with this. ARP sites again says that these bolts for the pressure plate should be between 98 and 125 foot-pounds. So I'm going to probably go somewhere like in between the two, around like 114 or so. Sweet! All right, here's our clutch installed and ready to go. I'm pretty excited about this. This is the first real part that I've actually put on the engine or the car, really like an actual performance part, not just, you know, taking crap off and putting it back on again. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. This is really cool. So next, I gotta put the bell housing on.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
All right, I screwed up again, which happens. This has to go on behind all the crap I just put on. So I'm gonna pull all of it off, put this guy on, and put all of it back on again, because that's the way things go sometimes. Well, that's one destroyed alignment tool. Oh, that was a pain in the ass. But anyway, moving on, we have the slave cylinder here. So this is the hydraulic unit. It comes with all kinds of weird little nipples and stuff. So we have these two screws here, these two bolts that bolt into the transmission case itself, and then you have your hydraulic fittings right here. Alright, we have our clutch together with our bell housing on, and then we have our slave cylinder here attached and bolted on. Everything is torqued to spec and ready to go. The last thing you want to do before putting everything actually together is take some measurements to make sure that everything will be lined up correctly with the slave cylinder and the input shaft, and also the fingers on the pressure plate. So what you do for your first measurement you would take is from the actual tips of the fingers here coming out to see where it lines up with the part of the bell housing that attaches to the transmission. So for me, it's right about 2 3/8 inches from the fingers of the pressure plate out to the bell housing. For the second measurement, we measure from the tip of this surface where it meets the fingers of the pressure plate to the transmission mounting piece here where it attaches to the bell housing. The trick here though is that you have to push the slave all the way down so the plastic here touches the base of the slave cylinder. Some people say take the spring off when doing this. I really don't want to deal with all that right now, so I'm just going to make sure that the spring is centered so the plastic won't be hitting the spring before it bottoms out. And then pushing it down and then taking a measurement. So my measurement's now about 2 1/4 inches here and 2 3/8 here, and that is exactly within spec, so we are good to go. I do not recommend doing that by yourself. That was awful. Thankfully, I had this bolt lying around, which was the same thread pitch as size as this one, but a little bit longer, so I could catch the threads on the bell housing that pulls this thing together. All right, so it's been a long day, and the engine is in, the transmission is in, the clutch, flywheel, pressure plate, slave cylinder, pilot bearing, all that stuff is in, and torqued to spec and ready to go. So that's great progress. I'm really happy, and it's all resting on my brand new engine mounts, which are also working perfectly. So I'm really happy about this. It's been a lot of just grinding, figuring all this stuff out, and like I said, I'm not a very good fabricator, but everything is in together. The hood fits. Everything fits. Everything fits. It's great. I'm so happy. So up next, we will have to be creating the transmission mount, which will be pretty easy. I'm just moving the factory cross member back a little bit and then drilling new holes. And then we start doing wiring and other stuff. So really, really exciting news. So thank you all for watching and sticking with me for this whole process. Please stay tuned for more Fully Spooled. I have a lot more to do on this car. Also race it eventually someday. So thank you again, and if you like this video, please do subscribe, and see you next time. That is super, super loud. I should have put in earplugs.